Get some bullets in it.
Okay, we will call to order the April 2nd, 2026 Committee of the Whole meeting. Number 2, discussion on financial plan and water rate case study by Ellers.
All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Ariana Schmidt. Thanks for having me back. Today we're going to go through the water and sewer rate study that I've been working closely with Nathan and Aaron on. So I really want this to be collaborative, so if you have questions or any thoughts, feel free to interrupt me and ask them in real time. Otherwise, at the very end, I do have a summary slide where I'll kind of recap everything and talk about the items that we're really looking for, not necessarily action, but more so consensus as to how you all feel like you want to proceed. So really where the driver comes from here is being able to ensure that the utilities can be self-sustaining and fund not only your existing operations, but also fund your future capital improvement plan. So you will see future projects built in here as well as placeholders. Really first, before we get into those projections, we're going to start by looking 5 years into the past. Not to say you should have done anything differently, but more so to take a look at what the trends are of the expenses and revenues of each utility. We'll then use those trends to help make assumptions to project forward, taking into account the future capital improvement plan, and show you what those future projections look like. We'll take a look at increasing O&M expenses, depreciation of assets, and then your pilot, as well as how are we going to fund these projects, whether that's debt or cash. And then we'll talk a little bit about bond covenants in terms of revenue bond coverage and all-in debt coverage, and I'll explain that more as we get into it. So we're going to start on the water side. Water and sewer are different in terms of how they are regulated. Water is really, unfortunately, other than determining when you go in for an increase, is not something you get to pick what that increase is. There are 2 different windows of opportunities that you can then choose to adjust rates. The Public Service Commission is the PSC. They're based in Madison, and they govern all water utilities in the state of Wisconsin. So they give you 2 different windows of opportunities in which you can adjust those rates. First of which is a simplified rate case. This is a standard rate increase that's set the same for every utility who applies for it. So we call that the SRC versus the CRC if you see those different acronyms. So this year, if you were to go in for a simplified rate case, it's a 3% increase for every utility who is eligible and applies for it. So that's set and standard. You can do this once a year. The idea behind these increases is really to help you keep up with inflationary increases in expenses. You can only do a simplified rate increase until you get to a cumulative 40% increase year over year. Right now, the utility is eligible for this once you file your annual PSC annual report, which is due in May, and that would be a 3% increase. If you need a higher increase beyond 3%, the only way to do so is to go in for a full rate case, which is called the conventional rate case. This pretty much you're always eligible for this at any time. However, there are very strict requirements as to what the rate increase is, how it's calculated, and the PSC dictates that. If you haven't been in for a rate case in a while, it's often going to be a lot larger of an increase. So the utility's last increase was in 2016, so we're looking at 10 years of catch-up in terms of when your last rate case would be done. So how this math works is important because it kind of explains why the increase goes up every year that you don't do another rate case. So there's 2 different ways that we determine how much revenue the utility should generate from user rates. That helps you determine what we call your revenue requirement, how much revenue the utility should have. There's a simple way to do so, which is more similar to how individuals operate on a personal level for your personal budget or even from the general side. So that's called the cash basis. That is, if you're looking on slide 5, the chalkboard here that we're looking at, cash basis method really looks at 3 cost buckets: your operating and maintenance expenses, any taxes or pilot payments, and then your debt service payments. And then additionally, any cash funded capital, so any projects that you're paying for with cash out of pocket. We then net out any other revenues that the utility is getting that are not related to user rates, and that's what gets us to that revenue requirement of how much revenue should the utility be generating. Unfortunately, the PSC does not use that same methodology, so they use what's called the utility basis, or the PSC math, on the right-hand side. So this is the methodology you are beholden to when you go in for a full rate case. So again, you don't get to pick this calculation. This is governed by the PSC. They take the same first two buckets as what we just talked through, your expenses and your taxes, but rather than looking at debt and cash funded capital, they focus on depreciation. So what they say is that you have to collect a certain percentage or a rate of return on the undepreciated value of your assets in the system. When you add new assets to your system or new capital projects, the undepreciated value of that is very large, right? Because it has no life use, so it has a lot of value. Therefore, the more assets you put into the system, the higher that net investment rate base is, and the higher the percentage they expect you to recover on that cost. So you can see how the longer that you go before doing a rate case, the more assets that you've likely added to the system, right? The larger your undepreciated value is, and the greater that increase becomes. So that is really the math that the PSC uses to generate the revenue requirement and how we're getting to the numbers that you see before us tonight.
What assets are we adding?
So at the end, we do have an appendix A and B at the end that break through the capital improvement plan. Is that?
That's a good
Right
question.
side
We
here.
talking infrastructure or what?
That's what I'm
Yeah.
trying to understand.
Yeah.
Yes.
Any
Sewer
road
laterals.
reconstruction, well,
Wastewater and sewer things, well,
Yep.
or that would be water.
okay, so you're talking about the entire, we're not just talking about the plant, we're talking, okay,
All this
Okay.
underground.
okay, thank you.
And the projects that you see added are over the next 10 years through 2034, but the rate increase that you're going to see shown is point in time. So that's right now, even before you add new assets. So it's basically saying for the last 10 years where you've added assets over time, and then also taking into account your existing assets and the current undepreciated value of those. Any questions on that math before I get into the numbers behind it? All right, then we'll show you what this means in slide number 6. So again, this is looking at a historical perspective so you can see where the utility would have been each year. Now this changes drastically year over year because you fund various cash funded capital year over year on a different level. What you see here on the top half, that cash basis, this is the math that I showed you on the left side of the chalkboard. So this is more of what makes sense from a budgetary perspective. Bottom half is that PSC math where they take into account the depreciation. So while the top is great to know, it doesn't really matter when it comes to what the PSC is going to give you in terms of a rate increase. They are going to use the math on the bottom half of this. So if I draw your attention to that utility basis, for example, if we go back to 2025, you can see those first three cost buckets, your O&M, your taxes, and your depreciation. And then NIRB, that's the net investment rate base, which captures that undepreciated value of the system. So you can see year over year that's increased, right, from 21 all the way through 2026, increasing year over year. Additionally, the rate of return, that benchmark that PSC sets as to what percentage you need to recover on that value of assets, has increased year over year. Now that percentage is typically tied to what rates are in the market plus 2%. So you can see right now this year it's at 6.6%. In the past, the lowest point it was in the last 5 years was 4.9%. Higher the percentage goes, higher the rate increase that they're showing you. So all that to say, that's what gets you to your user rate revenue requirement that the PSC requires, and that's what gets you to the rate adjustment necessary.
So it's the average rate plus 2%?
For how they determine the rate of return, yes. They look at the average market rates plus 2%.
Why plus 2%?
That's the benchmark that PSC has used.
Okay.
They do change it periodically. Earlier this year, before the market went a little volatile, it was around 6.8%, so it has come down slightly. It's not set in stone. It is also a movable object. So when we file rate cases, oftentimes if we feel that rate increase that's necessary is too high, that's one thing you can request from the PSC is to lower that rate of return. So for example, if you're going in for a rate case because you know you're funding a large project like your well number 2 project, and you know that you're going to get a safe drinking water fund loan, which is a state program in which they give you subsidized interest rates. It's a great argument to say, look, we're only going to be paying 55% of market rates. Why do we need a rate of return that's so high? So So that's something that we can help argue on your behalf with the PSC to say, maybe we can bring this rate of return down. Now, I will say success as to does the PSC honor those requests or not is all over the place. Depends on what individuals are in the PSC at the time and what the case is. So can never guarantee that they will give you that acceptance, but it is something that you can request and they do consider. So that is an option. All that to say, looking at 2026, before you add new assets to the system, that rate adjustment based on the PSC math is about 43%. I understand that's a lot.
That's a lot.
Not something anyone wants to hear. I wish I had better news for you, but that's where you're at based on the math of the PSC. So I'll show you a table here coming up as to what happens if we do nothing. Does that continue to get worse? The answer is yes. So if we turn to slide number 7, this is kind of saying, okay, if we're looking at this undepreciated value of the system, if we incorporate our capital improvement plan and other factors that go into this math, what does that do? Even if we assume that rate of return is declining about 0.2% or 20 basis points each year, you can see the magnitude of this rate adjustment goes up year over year. So from 2026 to 2027 alone goes up about 4% and continuing on so forth. So the longer you wait without doing anything, the bigger the rate increase gets. And this is not a matter of if, it's a matter of how big and when. Now you can eat into this by doing simplified rate cases along the way. That was that first option.
Yeah, right.
So the scenarios I'm going to show you break out what happens if we do simplifieds for a few years, and then what does that do to this rate increase in the future. So that's what this next slide is, as to how much time can we buy. Now I will say it's only been 10 years, so you're okay. But the PSC can technically come in at any time and force you into a full rate case. We've been seeing that quite often lately with communities who haven't done a rate increase since the 90s or early 2000s. So you do have time before I would expect that to happen, unless some other crazy factor comes to play. But for those communities who have gone 20 plus years, PSC starts to say, look, you've got 2 years, you've got to come in for 1. And those communities are really seeing way bigger increases. Some are seeing 100% to 200%. So just throwing that out there, that the longer you wait, the more assets you add, the bigger the magnitude. Not saying that's where you're going, but I'm just letting you know you're not alone in this. This is happening to many communities across the state. So, kind of to break this chart down in simplistic form, the first third on the top is your revenues. We've incorporated 3% increases. Let's say you're just going to do the simplified each year for the next 5 years. I will say it won't necessarily always be 3%. A couple years ago it was 4%. A couple years prior it was 8%, which is great, but that's the only time they've ever done an 8% increase. Otherwise, that increase that they set annually typically tends to be in line with CPI or inflation. So we've assumed 3% will be held flat since that's typically where the trend has been. We then net out your expenses, so your operating and maintenance and your pilot expenses, and then any debt service. Now the water utility has no debt right now. Any capital projects you've paid for, you've been paying for in cash. And while that's obviously great, it's not always sustainable, right? Especially if you're not incorporating a full rate case. So the future capital projects that we've shown, we've kind of got a mix of funding it with cash and with debt. So if you look about 2/3 of the way down, right under that transfer in line, you'll see the line that says less capital improvements. That's the total cost each year of the CIP. So in 2027, for example, it's about $240,000 of capital projects. We're showing that debt would be funding $210,000 of that, just to show you a scenario. Each year is the same. You'll see in 2030 that large debt issuance of $1.4 million is for the well number 2 project. So that's why you're seeing a larger dollar amount there. Net annual cash flow, you are seeing negative in the future years for a variety of reasons. One, in 2029, we're showing no debt. So if you are funding that project entirely with cash, obviously you're going to have a negative cash flow. But really what we're going to focus on are the 4 rows at the very bottom. 2 of which are important here. One is all-in debt coverage, and one is your cash position, which is identified as over Eller's target cash on hand. So I'm going to start there by looking at the cash. So right now, the utility, you can see at the end of 2026, we're forecasting to have just over $1 million on hand. Our target recommended cash that we would recommend that you maintain at all times is about $694,000 based on that year. That math comes from taking about 4 months of operating and maintenance expenses, plus depreciation, plus 1 year of debt service payments. That's our recommended target benchmark, which is also in line with rating agencies and PSC to make sure you have sufficient cash for emergencies. You're about $694,000 over that. Excuse me, I misspoke a moment ago. You are at our recommended target would be the difference between those two numbers. So you're $694,000 above the minimum cash benchmark that we would recommend that you have on hand. So what that tells us is you can then spend down some of that cash in future years to fund these capital projects, right? Not all of it, because we want to make sure you have enough cash to continue to apply in future years if you're not going in for a full rate case. So that's kind of how we got to the proposed scenario of a mix of debt and cash. As you issue debt, those new principal and interest payments start. You'll see that starting in 2028 and increasing thereafter. Now you can see after 2030, that recommended cash target on hand position starts to dip negative, meaning you start to go below the recommended cash we would advise you to have on hand. So if you do nothing other than simplifieds for the next 5 years, and then thereafter do nothing, you're going to start to have a cash flow problem. Now you could say, couldn't we just spend less cash, issue more debt? Yes. However, it's just going to continue buying you time. So that's why we've shown it the way we have as to what would make the most sense. So with this scenario, that's saying, okay, we could have 5 years technically to buy us time with simplifieds, understanding that with this methodology, by 2031, you would likely need to have a full rate case done and in effect. That rate case, based on the math and these simplifieds, would be about 55%. So over the next 6 years, that gets you to a cumulative increase of about 79%. And the next slide shows you what that means in dollars. But all that to say, right now, your increase you're looking at is about 42%. If you wait to do a full rate case, just do the simplifieds, you're getting to 3% over the next 5 years, plus a 54% increase. So the slide Nathan just turned to, slide 9, kind of shows you in dollars what does this mean. Scenario that we just talked through is the table on the right here, saying let's do 3% increases over the next 5 years. What does 3% equate to on a quarterly bill? It's about a $2 to $3 increase per quarter. So not crazy, but obviously helps you with your net position. Then if you went and did the full rate increase in 2031, 55% equates to about $50 per year of an increase. Excuse me, per quarter of an increase. Left-hand side is, okay, well...
The utility bill quarterly?
Yep.
The numbers over there, is that supposed to be what you think people are paying here?
It's just water.
Oh, just water?
Yep,
Okay.
That's
Just
the
water,
biggest
like-
thing with this.
On my water bill, it's nothing like that.
Right. So just keep in mind when you're saying 42% of an increase, it's just on the water side. The actual water bill in total for that year would increase about 10%.
Utility bill.
Utility. Sorry.
Okay. So this is just water, we're not talking about sewer, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah,
Sorry.
we will get to sewer, so that will be coming, but correct. Good distinction to point out. So, on the left-hand side, this is saying, what if we don't want to wait? What if we don't want to have a 55% increase in 5 years and 3% increases all of those years leading up to it? What if we said, let's just go for a full rate case right now? This would show about a 42% increase equates to about $34 of an increase per quarter. So you can see in total, the net change over the planning period almost doubles by waiting, right? Right now, you're gonna have about $36 of an increase. If you wait, do 3% each year, then a 55%, you're gonna see about a $62 net increase. So this is kind of where the policy decision comes in as to how do we want to approach this. We understand this is something that's going to be necessary soon. It's just a matter of how soon do you want to pull that trigger and what other projects do you want to execute along the way. Because this obviously assumes you're executing the CIP that we've outlined here.
I have a question. So we can't force a future board to make a decision based on something we would decide.
Right.
What locks us into that decision to say over the next, like, so this board may decide we wanna do the 3% each year and then
Mhm.
do the bigger one later, or vice versa. What if a new board comes along and changes that whole, I mean,
Yeah, it's quite possible.
okay,
Honestly, we recommend you implement rate increases one at a time and that you don't approve a multi-year
Okay.
because things are going to change, especially your capital improvement. These are very rough estimates. As you get into bids, each year, the environment is going to change. Your O&M expenses, we've estimated, will increase about 3% each year. We don't know if that will happen, right? We can't predict the future. So while this is a recommendation now, we really recommend you look at what to do in the next year, and then you revisit this. Updating this cash flow isn't too intensive if we do it annually, so we can update this each year after you make a decision, after we have actual capital plan projects, and show you what the new recommendations would be, because this will change.
Okay.
This is not meant to say in 2031 it will exactly be 54%.
I was under the impression that this is like a once every 10-year kind of decision, because I've been on the board for nearly 10 years,
Mhm.
and this is the first time since 2016 I've sat through anything like this.
Right, and part of that too is because when you get to the rate case and you have this large of a magnitude of an increase, you then get to the point where we have so much cash coming in, we don't even need to consider a rate increase. So in the appendices, I did attach the table that we just looked at, as to what would this look like if we did a rate increase now. So that's in Appendix B, if you wanted to take a look at that. You can see by looking at this, your cash position goes up quite a bit, and you stay relatively healthy for the next 10 years.
Okay, thank you.
So if you did that now, you may not need to consider this for 10 years.
Okay, thank you.
You can look at inflationary increases to help, but that's part of the downside of the PSC's math is that's kind of the situation it puts you in.
Okay.
So it's like a little bit of pain for 2 years through 2027, and then after that,
Right, we did build in a couple of future inflationary increases just to show you what that could look like and how that could help.
I'm not retiring next year, I can still.
Well, I think if we would do the rate case in 27, it's due July 31st this year, right?
Yep, so a timeline I can talk about a little bit here. So when you file a rate case with the PSC, it's about a 9 to 12 month process before you get to rate implementation. Each year is a test year, so you have to file by July 31st of each calendar year to avoid having to include future capital assets. So you can file the rate application after July 31st, but then any assets that go into service in 26 now have to be included. That would increase the rate increase to about 47% instead of 42%. If you file before July 31st, you don't have to include those new assets. So it's to your benefit to file sooner so you don't have to do that. The application process is not quick. It is very time intensive. There's a lot of steps that go into it. So if that is something you wanted to do before July 31st this year, you would want to give us that direction pretty quickly so we could get started on the application. It's a lot of information we need from staff that we'll lean on them for to compile. And then ideally, we bring the rate application results back to you because again, the 42% is what we're projecting based on what we know right now. When you get into the application, it's going to change. Then that's the rate increase you're requesting to PSC. They will make their own changes too. So it will likely change a little bit, a few percentage points. So what you request may not necessarily be what it is, but at least it gives you an idea.
So if you start the process of the application, say we went that route,
Mm-hmm.
does that mean once you start that process, then we're locked into that?
Technically, you could pull out before you get to the final order. It's not advisable because it's costly for
Right.
you to do the rate case. Staff's time that goes
Right.
into it. But yeah, so in summary, after you file the rate case, there's about 2 months of silence. PSC does an audit of every single PSC annual report you have filed since your last rate case. So in the last 10 years. So it takes them a while. Then they send data requests to staff and say, okay, we have all of these questions about everything that's gone on. How can you explain them? That helps them then make their adjustments to the math that's calculated here, the expenses and revenues. Then they bring you your revenue requirement. They then allocate that amongst customer classes through a cost of service study and say how you should apply the rate increase. So 42% is how much additional revenue you need. That's not to say every user is going to see a 42% increase to their water bill. They'll allocate it amongst residential classes, commercial classes. They'll also give you the opportunity to change how your tariff is structured as to how rates are billed. So a lot of things go into it. After that process is about 6 months from when you file. Then there's a public hearing that they require you to hold, all virtual, all via Zoom, but it gives the public an opportunity to send in comments. Then the PSC will digest that and basically make a final decision. They'll send you the final order with the final outcome, and then you have 90 days to implement those results. So that's why it takes about 9 to 12 months.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
not to dive into the weeds too deep here, but we have a significant capital improvements coming up with like the Main Street project and that sort of thing. So is it in our benefit to do something now, or so we don't have to list those assets, or what you're,
That's why the rate increase would go up the longer you wait.
okay.
So if you do it now, it's going to be most likely the lowest rate increase that it's going to be when you do a full rate case.
Okay.
So if we go back to, it was like the third slide, I think.
And you haven't even gotten to the sewer part yet,
I
but I
was
Nope,
just gonna
not
say,
yet.
yeah.
but it was a thought. I mean, we're not even halfway there
Yeah.
yet, but
Wow.
Slide 7 breaks that out. It shows you the longer you wait and what that percentage
Okay.
increase would go up to.
thank you.
Mhm. So all that to say, you've got some choices here, and we'll kind of get back to that at the summary slide at the end. But this is just kind of some different scenarios we've got so far on the water side. All right, we'll take a pause from water and jump into sewer. Good news on the sewer side is the PSC is not involved. They do not govern sewer rates. You get to set your sewer rates. So what you see here in this slide 11, same slide we saw before, but it's only the top half. It's only the cash basis math. So we're not using the PSC's math here. We're just saying, what do you need to sustain operations on a financial level? So what do you need to fund your O&M expenses, your debt, your cash funded capital? What is that revenue requirement? If you look in 2026, based on budget numbers, it shows that the rate adjustment's about 16%. It's not what we're recommending, because this is saying if you funded capital projects with cash of about $200,000 every year, that's what you would need. You're not doing that in your capital plan. So that will bring it down. So we'll show you what that looks like here moving forward. Slide number 12 shows the cash flow projection we're recommending. Same chart we just looked at. Two things I want to point out that differ here. One, sewer utility does have debt right now. There are debt service payments that they're paying of about $329,000 annually. That debt matures in 2030, meaning that debt goes away. Whatever asset that debt funded was a long-term asset and most likely is nearing the end of its life, because typically when you issue debt, you issue the debt to match the life of the asset, so that way when the debt matures, you now have room to incorporate new debt to fund new assets. We are not showing replacing that asset in here. So the capital project is just smaller projects of about $100,000 to $300,000 each year. And Erin, if there's anything else you want to add on that, you can. But the capital projects are generally small. So this is saying, even without replacing that larger asset, what could the sewer utility fund? Second is when you,
Larger asset being the water treatment plant?
Yep.
Okay.
right, and that's not included in here. So I just want to throw that out there because, again, as we talked about earlier, that's why we don't recommend you adopt this whole 10-year plan right now, because things are going to change. If you need to consider that project in the future, this will change. 4%, 3 years of the next 10 is not going to get you there. The other thing I'll draw your attention to in that bottom row, that all-in debt coverage versus the water and sewer debt coverage. So when you have revenue debt, the utility is beholden to a certain debt coverage calculation. That means for every $1 of $1 of debt service you have, you need to have at least $1.25 of net revenues available. Because what they don't want to happen is you end up flipping upside down where you have more expenses than revenues, right? And when you have revenue debt coverage, the bondholder is saying we want some sort of security to know that that won't happen and that you'll make sure you meet this debt coverage. So in this case, your debt is pledged by water and sewer revenues, meaning you can incorporate both revenues and both debt payments to get to that requirement. Water has no debt right now, sewer does, so having the water revenues helps your position here. What we really look at is all-in debt coverage, which is to say, from the sewer utilities perspective alone, what can the sewer utility sustain? And we're trying to stay above about $1.10 at minimum. So that's how we got to recommending 4% increases in 2028, 2030, and 2032. The other thing is cash position. We do show over the next 5 years, most of your projects being funded with cash because you are well over that minimum benchmark target that we'd recommend. In the future, we did incorporate another debt issue, so that way when your existing debt drops off, you don't go down to zero and you continue to have additional debt payments thereafter. All that to say, you can see you're clearly generating quite a bit of cash, but again, you likely have a larger project forthcoming that's not shown here. So much smaller recommendation here, but not something to forget because O&M is going up. If you just forget about it, you're going to be faced with a situation where you may need to do a larger increase all at once. So that's why we recommend smaller increases over time. So now we get to the combined utility bill here on slide number 13 for water and sewer. So this is saying if you did a rate case, you filed it before July of this year, looking at a 2027 implementation of about 42%. And then also if you did a couple inflationary increases in the future on both the water side and the sewer side, what would that do to your utility bill? We did alternate these increases, so that way if there's an increase to the water utility one year, the next year it's to the sewer utility. That way you're not hitting both utilities with increases in the same year. So those are staggered. So in this scenario with the sample rate increases that you see here, would get to about $300 of an increase on an annual utility bill over this 10-year period from implementing all of these increases. And again, this is a sample residential average user's bill, not to say this is what yours will look like. Are there any questions?
Could you redo
no.
that again? No, I've lost a little
Yeah,
bit.
can you go back a slide?
Yeah.
Okay, so, all right, so the debt, the cash flow, where we're negative, I'm assuming that's paying off the treatment plant, right? Okay, so after the treatment plant's paid off, then we still show a 4% increase every other year, even though we're not servicing any debt, and we still have to raise by 4%. Can you explain that?
We are showing future projects in 2031 being funded with debt.
Okay.
So new debt service payments start up again in 2032. They're
And
much
what-
smaller at about 50,000.
What projects are we looking at that are substantial enough to dwarf the payment of the sewer plant?
Yeah, so in 2031, it's for a backup generator and a water portion of the street project. I will say the intent here is not to focus in on each project individually. It's to show you what you could afford each year with these increases. Obviously, if that's not something you wanted to do and you wanted to do cash, you could. You have the cash to do so. It's kind of just to show you placeholders as to what you could execute with the proposed capital improvement plan in place. 4% will help you be self-sustaining so you can afford debt service payments. But again, we aren't showing that wastewater treatment plant project in here, so this will change.
Yeah, okay, I'm just asking the questions that are gonna get thrown at me, saying,
Yeah,
okay,
sure.
we paid off the plant, why are we, now, we're not paying on the plant anymore, okay, and we still have to raise the rates, for
So-
something that is gonna be larger than what we were paying for the plant.
Yeah, basically, the idea is that most likely there's gonna be another upgrade to the plant you would have to take on in the future. That's far enough away. As of right now, we don't see anything,
Okay.
but if the state changes any of the regulations on, phosphorus, like that can all affect whether or not we have to do an update. Yeah, I mean, if it came to it and we didn't have any other expense to do, you wouldn't have to necessarily follow those in 2030 and 2032, but I think as of right now, when you're looking at it, that's probably what it would look like if you had to potentially maintain that plant
Okay.
loan going forward.
Okay. The other comment that I have is that, I don't necessarily, subscribe to the belief that, raising water one year and then sewer the other year is going to you're going to be able to effectively communicate that that's something of a good thing to the people who get the bill, because like my bill and everybody else's bill, it's one number, right? I mean, it may be broken down on the card, but it's still one number, so what that equates to is raising the bill every single year, and not raising the bill and then not having it change. It's, I can't go to somebody and make it say, oh yeah, my bill's going up every year, and I said, well, no, it's not really going up every year. Just the water went up this year, just the sewer went up this year. No, the bill's going up every year, so I'm not sure that that's necessarily the best, I mean, looks different on paper, but it doesn't, I mean, to the person who's paying the bill, I don't think that's gonna make any difference.
Right, but I
They're
think,
just gonna see it go up every single year.
part of the idea is to have it go up every year, so you don't have to come back in 10 years from now, or 6 years from now, and basically do the same thing that we're having to deal with now, where a 42% increase is what we're dealing with. So if we can maintain at least some of these increases over time, it's gonna be less of an impact, and maybe you're dealing with a 12% or a 10% raise instead of a 42% in the future, because we never really maintained it. I think we probably would have had a way less of one if we would have followed the last one we did in 21, where they were suggesting that we were doing every other year a 3% on the water and a 4% on the sewer every other year as well. But we didn't, and now it's at 42. So I think that's kind of why, and the 4%, I get it. It's probably going to seem larger with those years compared to the other years.
Because the sewer is 3 times what the
Yeah.
water is.
Yeah, so
So a 4% on the sewer
is
is large.
yeah.
Our revenue should go up substantially with that new subdivision being put in, I think, over a period of 3 years.
Yeah, part of that was we didn't want to necessarily speculate too much on it, but that isn't part of this analysis.
It
So,
isn't?
no. So that's why the suggestion is to basically review these. I mean, if you're locking in for the 42% or whatever this year, that's good. And then going forward, I think we should probably have them update the numbers to continuously look at this going forward, so we don't fall back into this every 10 years having to do these larger.
And my other question is, where are we at with capacity on the sewer plant itself? Are we
Approaching, not
capacity?
right now, I think our, like, standard flows, we still have some, way to go. I think our max flows get somewhat close sometimes, like during large rain events and things like that.
No, and eventually it's gonna have to
When
be.
you start adding all these houses and
Right.
stuff.
Right.
Well, that's just it, how many lots are we adding?
So one of the
Yeah,
projects
so
actually
that's like
outlined
two.
in this capital plan is capacity study for the sewer and the treatment plant to see how many more houses we can take on before we need to start really looking at it.
Because we really can't do anything with the existing plant as far as increasing it with the footprint that it's at now, is what I understood anyway, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe
We can.
technology will change enough, too, but
We do have a little bit of room.
We'd have to move some stuff around.
What year was it built?
That I don't have in
I
front of me.
think it was in the 80s.
It was somewhere in the 80s.
When was it?
It was in the 80s.
Was it the
I
80s?
just, I saw a newspaper
I
clipping.
don't know why, I
like,
thought it was in the 90s.
Probably 2 months ago, and I remember seeing somewhere in the, like in the early 80s.
It's not a young plant.
So what is there, with the new development, what's the percentage increase on the
sewer and water.
number of residences that we're servicing? Is it 2, 3?
Fifth.
It's not 20% increase.
Yeah.
With just the 200 and some
Well,
lots?
we
is
have
it?
1,200 or so.
Okay,
Meters, correct? Or
okay, so
parcels?
12, we currently have 1,200 and we're adding another
250.
250.
Yeah.
Okay, so,
I mean, it's a good benefit to look at in the
Yeah.
future. The hard thing is we don't know how long it's gonna take to get to that number, we don't know,
yeah,
so, but that's why it probably doesn't hurt to kind of update these and kind of look at
I think,
the future.
I think it's important, very important, because
Yeah.
we sure haven't been doing it, yeah. And to lock us in is not a good idea either, which
Right.
I think we all agree with. but-
So just to kind of summarize, on slide 14, everything that we talked through, because I know it's a lot. Starting with the water side of things. Again, if you're looking at the two options of, do we want to do a full rate case now and get a lower overall increase? Then if you want to do that, you'd likely want to file an application by July of this year, which means you would need to give direction to do so pretty much right away. So that way we have time to do the application, go through it with staff, bring it back to you, and then get your permission to file before July 31st. So that decision would need to be made pretty quickly. If you're not prepared to make that decision, doesn't mean you still can't file this year. You can. It's just likely going to be about 4% higher than had you done it prior to July with the additions of the new assets. So that's item 1. Item 2 is, let's say you say, nope, we're not ready to pull the trigger on doing a full rate case. We recommend you still at least do simplified rate case this year, so you can at least get a 3% increase in, and do so annually for the next however many years until you do a full rate increase, because that will help lower the magnitude of the increase when you go for a full rate case eventually. So after you file your annual report this spring, you could do that at any time. It's something we can help you with. It's pretty quick, pretty easy with the PSC. It'll just be basically a new tariff will be issued, applying 3% flat across the board. It won't be any sort of cost of service analysis or anything like that. And then if that's the approach you take, we definitely recommend you update the cash flow or have us update the cash flow annually so you can see in real time as things change, where does that adjust our recommendations to in the future. On the sewer side, again, we recommend based on this plan inflationary increases, not in the next 2 years. The first rate increase we're showing is in 2028. So that would give you time to update the cash flow, see what you want to do on the water side first. Biggest message there is don't forget about this, because if you do, then that's when you get to the point of in 5 years now we're looking at a 20% increase or something like that to the sewer utility. I'm just making up numbers for sake of conversation, so don't hold me to that. But all that to say, the longer you put that off, the bigger the increase will be in the future. So you're creating a future problem for yourself by not acknowledging it at all in the future. So annually revisiting this, even if you do so as a part of your budget process, that can kind of be the trigger for a lot of communities that we're getting ready for budget season, we need an updated cash flow on the utilities, and a lot of communities will then set rate increases for the following year during budget season as well. So a lot of things to consider there. But really what we're looking for tonight is just discussion amongst you all and any direction, if there's any next steps that you would like all of us to take here.
Okay, so we have the option, we don't have to go for the, what was it, PRC, PSC,
CRC.
the CRC, yeah.
Yeah, this
So-
one's a 3. This
so,
is a 42.
I mean, in your chart here, you have it down for 2031, but that's just a date that you picked off in the future, it's not.
That's to say in order to fund the CIP for the next 5 years, if you just did simplified along the way,
Okay.
that's as long as you could defer it while still being able
Okay,
to
that's just as
sustain
long as we could,
operations.
so anywhere in between, it doesn't have to be 5 years of 3%.
Correct, you could decide to do it next year
Okay,
or in 2 years. You don't have to, that's just kind of drop dead. If you're going to push this off, most likely 2030 you would have to start filing that application, or you're going to have a cash flow issue.
But then in turn, the longer you wait, the higher that percent will be.
yeah.
And every year we're gonna be negative in the audit, basically,
Right.
removing our cash and emergency funds.
I understand.
Yeah.
I'm just looking at, I mean,
Right.
so if your projection is the new, that new subdivision, so you're gonna increase the stream of revenue coming off of the water, both water and sewer by 20% over, say, the next 3 years as that development adds 20% more houses to the village. these numbers, the total numbers of your inflow and outflow are gonna change significantly. Right?
So it's 20% residential.
Yeah,
That doesn't mean it's 20% of
Okay.
income.
so,
Because we'd have to get a little better of an estimate because of the industrial park, the multifamilies, those are all different, so.
okay,
The other thing I'll say is that isn't going to help too much with the PSC math because the bulk of
Includes
the
the
math
debt.
is coming from the value of the assets, not the number of users you have.
okay. Yeah, and I understand they're working.
But the assets.
The two things are working against
infrastructure,
each other
wouldn't
because you're adding more assets and
Yeah.
but you're also adding more users into the system.
Right. So
At
they'll,
the
they'll
same
still look
time.
at the users, but what I'm saying is the magnitude of the increase necessary because of the value of the system is not going to be offset by much because of the new users that are being added. It'll of course help, but it's not gonna make much of an impact.
The amount of revenue being brought in isn't gonna change.
On the sewer side, it will, because the sewer side, you get to set your own rates. So we're really just comparing revenues to expenses. So more revenues will obviously help.
When was our last rate increases?
When was it? 2016?
2016, and we haven't done any increases since then.
No. The last cash flow analysis we did was in 2021.
Okay.
So that's 30% inflation, just
Mm-hmm.
inflation for that time.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
I guess, does anybody have any direction we're kind of leaning, rather see us do, or?
I would say the biggest thing is focusing on the water side, and do you want to consider any sort of increase this year? If not a full increase, do you want to at least consider the inflationary increase or not? That would be the direction that staff would need. So we know, do we file a simplified? Do we go the full rate case, or do you not want to touch rates at all, and we don't do anything? Those are kind of the three options that we're looking for direction on.
I don't have to speak for everybody, but I can tell you, nobody wants to change the rates.
No.
That's pretty easy.
Which is what the problem is now. But
Yeah.
here we are
We still
10 years
have-
later.
But we
Yeah.
still have to sustain.
Kicking
I'm just
that
saying,
bucket,
that's
yeah.
that's an easy answer.
Uh-huh.
No, nobody wants to change
Nobody
rates.
But I do like the idea, and contrary to what you're thinking, Jim, like, you're thinking, well, just do an increase as an increase, but just, that, so kind of that inflationary increase each year is a little less, especially for people who are, your raise is maybe inflation type of raise, or your monthly budgeting type of thing. I just look at that kind of spreads it out a little bit better for some people, because not everyone has, so to do a rate, a big jump versus a little bit at a time, I think would be a little more comfortable for people.
When you do a rate case too, it allows us to switch our billing potentially from quarterly to monthly, which has been talked about before.
Yeah, I think that would be a big help.
I think it's just, I think it's a lot harder for people when it's quarterly.
Yeah.
So the recommended scenario is this alternating increase of 3% and 4%? 3% in the water, 4% in the sewer?
Right.
Is that what I'm catching?
Water will change annually. 3% is what it is this year.
And so an average tax bill then change over the period to 2035 is $307. Is that kind of what it breaks down then for a residential?
Correct.
We were able to do
Cumulative.
monthly,
Cumulative,
yeah. cumulative.
so
300 over.
over a 10-year period.
Yeah, so if you looked at it on an annual basis in 2026, let's say the only thing you did this year was a simplified rate increase, the average residential user would be paying $9 more for the year's worth of bills on both sewer and water. That's with just a 3% increase in water.
And the reason why we haven't been able to do monthly is because of this? Or this
No,
enables us
you
to
can
do-
only change it during when you
During- when you
do
do
the rate case through the PUC.
I think that would be huge for a lot of people, just having a monthly bill versus the quarterly. Not that people want more bills, but I think it helps you manage your budget better.
Yeah.
The handy dandy little app that you can watch your water, that's kinda neat though too, so. It helps you manage your stuff, but no one wants to see an increase, but I think
Right.
responsibly we need to do something.
Yeah, because you have to think about the end result. If we don't, we're gonna get slammed, and it's gonna be slammed heavy,
Bad.
like we were in 2016. It wasn't pretty. Because former boards weren't responsible to look at it and do the small increases. Then it was, like you said, it's gonna be large, and it's not gonna be good.
You know, it's gonna be heavy either way. I mean, everyone complains about the water prices now, but at the end of the day, we gotta sustain ourselves, right? So,
There is also a chart at the end in the appendices that shows you where you compare to other communities in Outagamie County. Right now, you're about bottom third of neighboring utilities, on the water side in terms of rates. Keep in mind, every utility is different. It's not an apples to apples comparison, but if it were, you're on the bottom third, meaning there's a lot of communities that are more expensive than your rates right now
For water.
for water,
Right.
correct?
And a lot of them are going up
Su-
right now
Right.
Yes,
also,
yes,
from what
correct.
I've heard,
Sewer is what's high.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think Grand Chute was the only one listed in that scenario that you're talking about, that was. Getting back, I'm confused on this water impact thing here. You mentioned $9 change over the prior year. That's for both water and sewer, correct?
Well, yes,
So that would be
because
their
it-
total bill change then,
Correct.
If you didn't change the sewer. that's good.
Yes. Correct,
But that's going on an alternating yearly basis of increases though.
Right.
yes.
And that year it just happens to be an increase in what? Was it the water? Yeah.
And then the next year's water as well, that's that 42%. And
next
then
year's just sewer.
after that, it's alternating every year.
Okay.
So what is the general consensus that we do?
I do like paying 42 in 2027, just to get it done, and if it's broken up monthly billing.
Speak up, I don't.
I mean, I kinda, and I don't like to spend money, but I kinda like, the idea of getting it caught up after it goes 3%, then the 42 in 2027, rather than pushing and pushing. Especially if we can go to monthly billing. I mean, I know it's a chunk over the year, but it's like $10 a month
I
total.
think it'd be easier for people to bite off.
Right.
It's no different than your We Energy bill. I
Right.
mean,
Well,
they go up and no one blinks an eye,
Right.
and it's a monthly bill, so it's not, it doesn't hurt you quite as bad as when you see a $200 bill versus a $300 bill or a $600 bill every 3 months. So that's the shocker,
Well, and we can.
because I've had people call me about, my water bill is $600. But if they were paying it 200 and 200 and 200, they'd be fine. You know, it's just how people perceive that large total number.
Well, it's perception as well as budgeting, the 200 a month, putting it aside
Yes.
for the bill versus it going in and out cash-wise.
Mhm.
Naturally, there's a difference.
And
Mentally, it's different.
if we did, go that route, like, you just bite it off, rip the Band-Aid, you do the 42 you know, we do that. We can reevaluate if we wanna do the increases after that.
Mm-hmm.
So that isn't like we're not locked into it, so we don't have to do the 3% every year after.
Correct.
Once we get that increase, then we can look at where we stand.
Yep.
And by that time, maybe we will have more contributing to it.
Right,
Mhm.
exactly.
So it's not a for sure thing that it's gonna be every other year.
Right.
Well, one of the advantages too to a monthly bill is you could make changes to your water consumption.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so like you see a monthly bill and you're like, okay, why did it go up? Type of thing. And you, obviously this little app type of thing is, you can kind of keep an eye on things, you know, where are we using more water? But I think I just love the idea of a monthly bill. I just think that would be so much nicer for our community.
Well, and I think also to drag it out, you're doubling the cost
Right.
Yeah.
and just pushing the problem down the road.
Yeah,
It just kind of sucks no matter what. I mean, something has to be done.
so the consensus is to go ahead with the study? Is that what we're saying?
With the recommended scenario though, is that what we're,
Well,
oh,
from the water I would recommend that we try to do the study for the July 31st cutoff so that we can
Right.
get that alternated rate at the 42.75 or whatever it may be in 2027 to get us where we need to be. That's what I would suggest. And I would push along the whole concept of a monthly bill to help people swallow it better.
And then wait on the sewer.
Yeah, I mean, if you have a little bit of time to wait on the sewer, I would wait.
On the water side, we had shown doing the simplified increase this year of 3%, which would then get you to the 42% for the
Yep.
full rate case.
For
Is
next
that
year,
what you're
yep.
proposing?
Yep, that's what I would suggest.
Okay.
Mhm.
It's also a good opportunity then to kind of plant the seed with your users that, look, we're doing a 3% this year, we're filing an application to do a larger increase that's coming, and kind of start that messaging too. We've seen a lot of communities use that simplified as that stepping stone.
And these are not, I mean, the 3% and the 42, this is an estimate, right?
Correct.
Because this is not in our control. This is, we
Correct.
submit
Yep.
the proposal to do this, and an outside entity says, this is what you're gonna,
Yeah, it's
Just
based
what
on
you're
our
interested
best known numbers that we
So-
have and what
Right.
their calculations may be.
Correct. So we would come back probably in June, show you the results of the application as to what we're requesting, which will be pretty close to that. And then once we file, it's in the PSC's hands as to, is it gonna be 42%? Are they gonna move it up? We've seen often that they move it down too. Just depends. I don't know where it will be. But my point is, if you give us direction to do the application, you will see it once more before we officially file it.
I mean, we can't really do any changes on debt because there is no debt, so it's not like we could have paid off a bunch of the debt and gotten a better number at this point. Because that's the real factor in this one is whether you have debt. We don't, not in water. Because if you had a lower debt, then it would decrease the amount that you need to have to cover.
So we're okay on that,
I think so.
everyone?
no.
Nobody is, but.
I wish there was another column in here that would show, you know, I mean, so you got 2031 versus 2027, right? I wish there was another column that said, okay, if you did 3% this year, 3% next year, the third year it would be this percentage, and if you did it for 3 years, the fourth year would be this, if you did it for 4 years, right? I mean, I wish there was another column that said, okay, every year you put it off, this is how much it's gonna go up, so we could,
It'd be
If
nice if
you-
it was
You
act
could-
like you could play with the numbers in here a little bit.
well, you
and
could at
see.
least look at it,
Yeah.
and, you know, cause I mean, you've got two numbers to look at, and one doubles, you know, the increase over the other,
But it is up in the water part a little bit, I think.
Yeah, if
And
you
if you
go
go
to-
to the water section,
Yeah, slide 9 shows you the comparison of doing it in 2027 or doing it in 2031. Obviously, if you do it somewhere in the middle, it's gonna be somewhere in between those two numbers.
so you just adjust the 3454 on that slide you were looking at
Mhm.
for the water down to the 242 or the 250 or the 257, times 4. Well, not times 4.
Anything else? Are we good?
Thank
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Then on number 3, I would need a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned at 6 o'clock. Does anyone need a break before we start the board meeting?